Layla heard him before she saw him. His voice cut through the rain like something sharp thrown against glass. She was standing behind the counter of her boutique, folding the last of a shipment of silk scarves, pale gold ones that she had ordered 3 months ago and nearly returned twice, when the sound reached her through the shop window. She knew that voice. She had spent 2 years learning its patterns, its warnings, the particular pitch it reached before things got worse. She had moved 3 cities to get away from it. Darius was standing on the wet pavement outside, arms out like the rain was something he was presenting to the empty street. He was not yelling at anyone in particular. He was yelling at the building, at her window, at the version of her life that had the nerve to continue without him. She did not move. She refolded the gold scarf. The corners did not come out right. She folded it again. 3 people across the street had already pulled their curtains back. A woman walking a small dog crossed to the other side without slowing down. Darius did not notice any of them. He never noticed things that were not about him. Layla set the scarf down on the counter and looked at it. She had paid too much for that shipment. She had been proud of it. Now she was standing behind it like it was a wall, listening to a man she had once loved make noise in the rain, and the scarf still had wrong corners. She did not go to the door. She did not call anyone. She stood there and breathed through her nose the way her therapist had taught her. 3 counts in, 4 counts out, until her hands stopped feeling like they belonged to someone else. What she did not do was look out the window. What she did anyway was look out the window. Darius had not changed. That was the worst part. He was still handsome in that way that takes a moment to wear off, the kind of face that made people give him the benefit of the doubt a few seconds longer than they should have. He had his collar up against the rain. His voice was still climbing. Then she saw the car. It was parked at the corner, dark and still, engine running. It had been there, she realized with a jolt, since before Darius arrived. She had not registered it because it was the kind of car that did not ask to be noticed. No shine, no display, just presence. The kind of vehicle that belongs to people who do not need to announce themselves. She watched it. Nothing happened. Darius was still talking. His words were not reaching her anymore. She was watching the car the way you watch something that has not decided what it is yet. Then the door opened. The man who stepped out was tall and wore a charcoal coat that the rain slid off without wrinkling. He did not look up at the sky. He did not hurry. He stood on the pavement and looked at the scene in front of him. Darius, the empty street, the lit window of her shop, the way a person looks at a map they have already memorized. He was not looking at Darius. He was looking at her. Through the glass. Through the rain. Directly, without apology, without pretense, as if the window between them was not there. Layla picked up the scarf again. She turned it over in her hands. The corners were still wrong and she could not make herself care about them at all now. Something about being seen that directly, from that distance, by someone she had never laid eyes on in her life, made every small task in her hands feel very far away. He crossed the street. Not toward Darius, who was still performing for an audience that had largely dispersed. Not toward the car, toward her door. She heard the bell above the entrance ring. She had installed that bell herself, on her second day in the new shop, because she liked knowing when the world was coming in. He was inside. He shook nothing off. He simply moved into the space of her shop as though he had walked into 100 rooms and none of them had made him feel anything he needed to account for. His eyes moved once, to the back wall, to the door behind the counter, to her, and then stayed. He said quietly, "Is that your problem outside, or does he belong to someone else?" His voice was nothing like Darius's. Where Darius's voice climbed, this man settled. It landed in the room like something set down carefully. She said, "He's no one." He looked at her for a moment, considering this, the way a doctor looks at an X-ray, not to judge, just to read. Then he nodded once, as if she had told him something useful. "My name is Roshan," he said. "I'm going to help you end this quickly. If you don't want that, say so now, and I'll leave." Layla looked at him. She looked at the door. She looked at the gold scarf in her hands, which had never, not once in 20 minutes of folding, come out with 4 even corners. She said nothing. He took her silence the right way. He walked to the window, not close enough to be visible from outside, but close enough to assess, and he looked at Darius for exactly 3 seconds. Then he came back to her side of the counter. "When I tell you to play along," he said, "play along." She had just enough time to think that this was an unusual sentence before he did something she was not prepared for. He kissed her. It was not rough. It was not dramatic. It was measured and deliberate and done in full view of the window, and it lasted long enough to matter and stopped before she had processed what was happening. His hands were on her shoulders, not gripping, just there, like punctuation. When he stepped back, she could see through the glass. Darius had gone still. Whatever audience he had built in his own head, whatever story he had come here to star in, it had just changed scripts on him, and he did not know the new lines. He stood in the rain for 4 more seconds. Then he turned and walked away. She watched him go. She was aware of a number of things simultaneously, that her heart was moving faster than she had given it permission to, that Roshan had already stepped back to a respectful distance, that the shop smelled like wet wool and cold air from the open coat he wore, and that the gold scarf was still in her hand. All 4 corners were wrong. She set it down. Roshan reached into his coat and placed a small card on the counter. There was no name on it, no logo, just a number, handwritten in dark ink, and below the number, 2 words written small and level. He'll be back. He looked at her once more, said nothing further, and walked out. The bell above the door rang when he left, the same as when he came in. She stood behind the counter and listened to the sound of it settle. Her phone buzzed. A message from her neighbor, Mrs. Fadel, who lived 2 floors above the fabric shop across the road and had eyes like a surveillance system. Layla, that man who just left. Do you know who his family is? Call me. Layla looked at the card. She picked up the gold scarf. This time she did not try to fold it. She did not sleep well that night. This was not new. She had not slept easily in years. But this was a different kind of wakefulness. Not the old kind, where she lay still and listened for sounds in the hallway and ran through exit routes in her head. This was a new kind of awake, the kind that has no object. She stared at the ceiling of her apartment and she thought about nothing specific and everything arrived anyway. She thought about the card on her counter. She had left it there when she closed up. She had not put it in her pocket or her bag or the drawer where she kept things she was not sure about. She had left it on the counter like a receipt for a transaction she had not agreed to. She thought about Mrs. Fadel's message. She had not called her back. She had read it 3 times. She had put the phone face down on the kitchen table and made herself a cup of tea she did not drink. She thought about Darius. This was the part she was most careful with. Thinking about Darius required a particular kind of discipline, the same way you handle something that has cut you before, not avoiding it entirely, just aware of where the edges are. She thought about the sound of his voice, and the particular way it had not changed in 2 years, the way his face had looked through the glass when he saw her, the way he had left. He had left, that was the thing. In 2 years, any time she had tried to make him leave, asked, demanded, left herself, he had always found a way back. Tonight, one stranger had changed the picture, and Darius had walked away like the scene no longer interested him. She found this more unsettling than his presence had been. By morning, she had made her decision. She told herself it was practical. She was good at telling herself things were practical. She went to the shop. She opened at 9, as always. The card was on the counter, as she had left it. She looked at it while she turned on the lights. She looked at it while she started the coffee. She looked at it while a regular customer browsed the linen section and asked about a fabric in the back. She picked up the card when the customer left. She looked at the 2 words below the number. He'll be back. She knew Darius. She had lived with that knowledge for 2 years, and she had spent 2 more years trying to set it down, and it had not fully set. She knew he would come back. He always framed it as love. It was not love. Love does not require an exit strategy. She called the number. It rang twice. I thought you'd wait another day, Roshan said. No greeting, no surprise. I want to know what you're offering, she said. A conversation, today, if you can. I'm at the shop until 6. I know, he said, and ended the call. She held the phone and stared at the linen section and thought about those 2 words, I know. He said them the way a person states a weather fact, not threatening, not possessive, just accurate, which was almost worse, because it meant he had been paying attention before she knew there was anything to pay attention to. At 4 in the afternoon, he walked in. No drama, no announcement. He was wearing a gray jacket this time, open at the collar, and he looked different in daylight. Not less certain, just more present. The night before, he had been a silhouette with a purpose. Today he was a person with a face that cost her a full second before she could arrange hers. He was the kind of face that made a person feel slightly annoyed at themselves. He sat down at the small chair near the window that was meant for waiting customers and looked at her with that same reading an X-ray attention. She came around the counter and sat across from him and folded her hands in her lap. "Talk," she said. He did. He was brief and direct and did not waste words on cushioning. He told her that Darius had a pattern, that he had looked into it, carefully, and that pattern suggested he would return within the week, possibly with people he trusted to back him up. He told her that the most efficient way to close this situation was for Darius to believe she had moved on, specifically to someone whose name carried enough weight that following her became more trouble than it was worth. "And you're offering to be that person," she said. "For 3 weeks. Public appearances, nothing more." She studied him. Why? The question landed and stayed. He looked at her the way she looked at a fabric she was not certain about yet. Not dismissive, not enthusiastic, just honest attention. "I saw what was happening," he said. "I was in the area. I made a decision. I don't usually explain decisions after I've made them, but you asked directly, so." She waited. He said, "I don't like that kind of situation." She thought about a lot of things in the silence after that. She thought about the years she had spent building a life that did not require anyone else to make decisions for her. She thought about the shop, the shipment of gold scarves that still had a wrong-cornered one at the bottom of the pile. She thought about Darius's voice in the rain. She said, "One condition." He raised his chin slightly, listening. "No more unannounced contact, no showing up without warning, no—" She paused, because the right word was somewhere between presumptuous and what happened last night, but neither was quite it. "No surprises." He nodded once, agreed. She had prepared for him to negotiate. She had prepared 3 follow-up arguments. His immediate agreement dismantled all of them and left her sitting there with no next move. 3 weeks, she said. 3 weeks, he confirmed. He stood, and she realized he was leaving, and she realized she had not asked anything she actually wanted to know. She had asked the practical questions, the reasonable ones. She had not asked, "Who are you exactly?" She had not asked, "Why does your name make Mrs. Fidel send a message at 10 at night?" She had not asked, "Why did you already know I would be at the shop?" He was almost at the door when she said, "What do I tell people?" He turned. "That we met through a mutual acquaintance. That things moved faster than expected. Keep it simple. Simple things are easier to believe." She watched the door close behind him. She went back behind the counter and picked up the gold scarf. She folded it once, evenly, and this time all 4 corners were perfect. She was not sure what to do with that. She put the scarf down and pulled up her contact list and found Mrs. Fidel's number. She hit call before she finished the thought, because if she finished the thought she would not make the call. Mrs. Fidel answered on the first ring. "I was waiting," the older woman said. "Sit down." "I'm standing." "Then hold on to something." Layla put her hand on the counter. Mrs. Fidel said, "His family owns property across 4 districts. The legitimate side. The other side." She lowered her voice, which was pointless because she was alone in her apartment. "The other side is the kind that does not advertise. His grandfather built the business. His father kept it. He is the 3rd generation. People do not cross his family unless they are willing to live with the consequences of that." Layla said nothing. "He kissed you," Mrs. Fidel said. "Through the window. I saw." "It was not," Layla started. "I am not judging you," Mrs. Fidel said. "I am informing you. There is a difference. A man like that does not kiss a woman through a shop window for no reason. Either you matter to him already, or he needed people to think you did. Either way, Layla, either way you should know what you are standing next to." Layla thought about the card, the 2 words, the way he had said, "I know," without making it sound like a threat. "I know what I'm standing next to," she said. She did not know if that was true. She closed the shop at 6. She drove home. She made the tea she actually drank this time, standing at the kitchen window, watching the street below. Her phone buzzed. A number she did not have saved. She knew which number it was. It read, "Did you eat?" She stared at the message for what felt like a long time. She had not eaten. She had meant to. There was food in the kitchen. She had stood in front of the refrigerator at lunchtime and closed it again without taking anything out. She typed back, "Yes." The reply came in 11 seconds. I don't believe you. She put the phone down on the counter and looked at it. She picked it up. She looked at the message again. She put it back down. She opened the refrigerator. She made herself a plate of food she could not entirely name at the end of it, because she was thinking about something else the whole time she was cooking. She ate standing at the counter. It was the first real meal she had eaten since Tuesday, and she had not noticed until just now. When she was done, she looked at her phone again. She did not type anything back, but she did not delete the message either. She went to bed at 11. She set the plate in the sink. She turned off the kitchen light. She lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling. She thought about what Mrs. Fidel had said. She thought about the 2 words on the card. She thought about the way Roshan had agreed to her condition without bargaining, and how that had felt like the floor shifting slightly under her feet. Not the alarming kind of shift, just the kind that reminds you the ground is real. She thought about the fact that for the first time in a very long time, Darius was gone from her street, and she had not been the one to make him go. She did not know what to do with any of this. She slept, though. For the first time in a long time, she slept before midnight. 3 days later, Darius's message arrived through a mutual contact named Greg, who had been friends with both of them once, and was now caught between them like furniture nobody wanted to move. Greg texted her. He asked me to pass something along. I'm not getting in the middle of this. I'm just the messenger. The message was, I know what you're doing. That man is dangerous. I'm trying to protect you. Layla read it sitting in the back room of her shop during her lunch break, surrounded by bolts of fabric in colors she had picked, because they made her feel like the world had order. Deep navy, warm terracotta, a green that was almost gray. She read it once. She read it again. She put the phone face up on the cutting table and looked at the ceiling. The thing about those words, I'm trying to protect you, was how familiar they were. Not in the way that comfort is familiar, in the way that a particular kind of weather is familiar, the kind you recognize before you look up. Darius had said them before, different context, same sentence. And the night he had said them, before everything that came after that night, she had believed him. She had thought, here is a man who wants to take care of me. She had not understood yet that care and control are words that live in different rooms but sometimes share a door. She picked up the phone and typed back to Greg, tell him I'm fine. She sent it before she could add anything else. Adding anything else would have meant engaging, and engagement was the door you should not open. She ate half a sandwich and did not taste it. The arrangement with Roshan had been running for 4 days by this point. They had appeared together twice. Once at a small restaurant near the waterfront that she later learned he had booked without making a reservation because reservations were for people who were not certain they would have a table, and once walking through the weekend market near the square, where 3 of her regular customers had seen them, and she knew, because of the way her customers looked and the way they were very careful not to look, that the information was already moving through the network of people who knew her name. Both times had been strange in the same specific way, not uncomfortable. Strange. He did not perform. That was the thing she kept coming back to. When a person is pretending to be with someone, there is a texture to it, a slight excess of attention, a smile held half a second too long, a gesture that is designed to be seen. Roshan had none of that. He simply walked beside her. He held a door. He asked her questions that were not about her past or her pain or her situation, but about the shop, about fabrics, about why she had chosen the particular deep navy she was using in the front window display that week. She had told him. She did not plan to tell him. She had just answered, because it was easier than not answering, and then she had said more than she meant to, and he had listened without the particular energy of someone waiting for their turn to speak. She had not had a conversation like that in long enough that she could not date it. On the 5th day of the arrangement, she was reorganizing her storage room when she heard a voice outside the shop that was not Darius, but made her stomach drop in the same way. She went to the front window. There was a man she did not recognize standing across the street, not moving, not looking at anything in particular. He was dressed plainly. He had a coffee cup in one hand. He was just standing there, the way people stand when they are not just standing there. She watched him for 2 minutes. He did not move. She picked up her phone and typed to Roshan. There is a man outside my shop. He's been standing there for a while. Does he belong to you? The reply came in 40 seconds. Yes. Is that a problem? She stood in the middle of her shop floor and felt something she could not immediately name. It was not fear. It was not gratitude. It was the particular sensation of realizing that someone had made a decision about you, a decision that affected your life and your safety, without asking first. And the further sensation, which she resented more, that the decision had been made out of something that looked from the outside like genuine concern. She typed, "We need to talk about what you're doing without telling me." He typed back, "Tonight. I'll come to you at 7. She put the phone in her pocket and looked at the man across the street with his coffee cup. She turned back to the storage room. She alphabetized the supplier folders she had never alphabetized in 3 years of owning the shop. She was at N when she caught herself and stopped. He arrived at 7, on the dot. She had the front door unlocked and she let him in without a greeting and went behind the counter because she felt more like herself behind the counter. He came and stood on the other side of it, which she noticed. He did not circle it, did not come to her side, just stood where the counter placed him and waited. She said, "You put someone outside my shop without telling me." He said, "Yes." She said, "That is not part of what we agreed to." He looked at her steadily. "I know." She waited for the justification, the explanation, the softening. It did not come. He simply stood there and let the admission sit between them. She said, "Explain it." He said, "Darius has a way of escalating that moves faster than people expect. I have seen the pattern before, in different people. I wanted someone there in case it happened during business hours, when you were alone." He paused. "I should have told you. I didn't, and that was wrong." She looked at him. She had prepared herself for something different, for the kind of explanation that dresses itself up as reason but is really just another form of control. She had been waiting for the familiar shape of it, the logic that sounds like care and functions like a cage. This was not that. She could see the difference. She had learned, at some expense, to see the difference. "Tell me next time," she said. "I will," he said. And then, "There is something else." He told her about his family. Not everything, she understood that even as he spoke, but enough. He told her there were people who did not like the direction he made certain choices, and that being seen publicly with a woman they did not know, had not approved of, did not fit the picture they had of how his life was supposed to arrange itself, had created friction. He said it simply and without drama. She said, "Is that a problem for the arrangement?" He said, "For the arrangement, no. For what comes after, possibly." She looked at him. "There is no after." 3 weeks. He said, "Yes. 3 weeks." He said it clearly and without argument. He also did not look away. She found a thread on the sleeve of her cardigan and pulled it loose. She wrapped it around her finger once. She let it go. She said, "Someone from your family called you today." He went still. "I didn't mean to hear it," she said. "I was in the back room when you called me earlier, and the door was open and your phone rang in the hall. I heard your voice, not the words, just the—" She searched for it, the change in it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My brother." She did not ask more. She had not earned more, and she knew it, and she respected the boundary the way she wanted her own respected. She came around the counter. She went to the small table near the window, the one where customers sat, and she set 2 cups down and poured from the carafe she had brewed an hour ago, mostly out of something to do with her hands while she waited for 7 o'clock. She slid a cup across to him. He looked at it. He looked at her. He sat down. They drank coffee on opposite sides of the small table near the window, with the shop dark around them and the streetlights on outside, and she did not ask about his brother, and he did not ask about the 3 years she had built her life around not needing anyone, and somehow this was the least lonely she had felt in the entirety of that time. She registered this with the same careful attention she gave to a new fabric, not committing to anything, just noting the texture, noting what it was. Outside, the man with the coffee cup was gone. She did not know when he had left. She had stopped watching for him somewhere in the last half hour, and she was not sure what to do with that fact either. When Roshan left at 9, she walked him to the door and said, "7 is fine. For next time, if you come." He said, "I'll come." And then, because he was consistent in this way, he said nothing further, and he left. She locked the door. She turned off the shop lights one by one and watched the dark settle over the fabric bolts and the display tables and the gold scarves in the front window. She picked one up on her way through. She folded it, 4 corners even. Perfect. She had no idea, standing there in the dark of her own shop with a perfectly folded scarf in her hands, what she was building. She knew the word for what she was supposed to be doing. Arrangement. 3 weeks. Practical. Simple. And she knew, in the way you know things before you are ready to say them, that those words had started to describe something else entirely. She put the scarf down. She went home. She did not check her phone until morning, and she spent the time between now and sleep thinking about everything except what she was actually thinking about. On the 10th day of the arrangement, Darius walked into her shop. Not at night, not in the rain, not yelling. He came on a Tuesday morning at 11:15 when she had 2 customers browsing the linen wall and a delivery she was signing for in the back room, and he came like a man who had thought carefully about his timing, which was the version of him she had always found hardest to navigate. The yelling version was frightening, the controlled version was convincing. She heard him say her name from the back room. Her name, said calmly, in a space that belonged to her. She heard one of the customers say something polite and confused. She signed the delivery form and capped the pen and set it on the box with the deliberate movements of someone choosing their own pace. She walked out. He was standing near the door, hands in his jacket pockets, looking around at the shop with an expression she knew, the one that meant he was computing the distance between what he expected and what he found. He had expected something smaller, something less hers. "This is nice," he said. She stood at the edge of the counter. "I'm working," she said. "Whatever you need to say it briefly." The 2 customers had drifted toward the window display, the careful drift of people pretending not to be listening. Darius moved slightly further from the door. "Just enough." "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. She said nothing, because she had learned that saying nothing sometimes worked faster than anything else. "That man," he said. "The one you're seeing. Do you know who he is?" "I know him," she said. "Do you know his family?" He waited. "What they do?" "I know enough." He looked at her with something that was almost sadness, and this was the version of him that required the most care, not the anger, which she could name and stand against, but the performance of concern, which sat in the space where something real used to be. "Layla, I made mistakes. I know that. But what I'm saying right now has nothing to do with you and me. That man's world has a cost. People who get close to it." He stopped. She looked at him. He looked back at her. She said very quietly, "You said those exact words to me once before. A different sentence with the same shape. You told me you were trying to protect me, and then you used protecting me as the reason for everything that came after." She held his eye. "I don't need that kind of protection anymore." He opened his mouth. He closed it. She said, "You need to leave my shop now." The 2 customers were very still near the window display. Darius looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the shop around her, at the fabric bolts and the careful window arrangement, and the carafe on the small side table, and the perfectly folded gold scarves in the front display, and something moved through his face that she could not fully read, and then it was gone. He said, "I hope you know what you're doing." She said, "I do." He left. The bell above the door rang clean and certain. One of the customers, an older woman in a blue coat who had been coming to the shop for months, turned from the window display and said, "You handled that beautifully." Layla looked at the door. She thought about the way she had said, "I do" with such conviction, and the way conviction sometimes runs just slightly ahead of actual knowing. She went back behind the counter and straightened a row of sample cards she had already straightened that morning. That evening, she told Roshan. She told him the way she told him most things now, directly, without softening it, sitting across the small table near the window with coffee cooling between them. She told him what Darius had said, and what she had said back, and how he had left. Roshan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "He's not wrong about the cost." She looked at him. He said, "About my world. About what being close to it means." He held her look. "I want to be clear about that." "You're telling me this why?" she said. "The arrangement is almost over." "Yes," he said. She picked up her coffee cup. It was cold. She held it anyway. "Then why does it matter what your world costs?" He was quiet for a moment. She watched him think through something. She watched him decide. He said, "Because I would like to make a different arrangement after the 3 weeks are done, and I think you should know what you're deciding about before you decide." She set the cup down. The table was very small, and the distance between them across it was shorter than it had ever felt. She said, "That's not how arrangements work. Arrangements end. This one can, he said. Or it doesn't have to. She thought about 3 years of quiet. She thought about what she had built and why she had built it, and the price of building it. She thought about the gold scarf with the wrong corners, the one she had refolded 100 times. She thought about the way she had slept before midnight for the first time in years, on the night of the rain, and she had not connected it to anything until right now. She looked at him. I need time. I know, he said. I'm serious, she said. Not a gesture. Not a few days. Time. I'm not going anywhere, he said, and the simplicity of it made her throat tighten in a way she did not expect. He left at 9 again. She sat at the small table after he was gone and looked at the empty coffee cups. She looked at the dark street outside the window. She looked at her hands on the table, still, no thread to pull, no scarf to fold, nothing to do with them. She left them there. She did not try to do anything with them at all. The third week ended on a Thursday. Layla knew this the way she knew many things she was not focusing on, clearly but at a distance, the way you know rain is coming before you check the sky. She had not said it aloud. Neither had Roshan. They had continued as they had continued. The appearances, the coffee at 7, the conversations that had long since stopped being about the arrangement and become about other things, a book she had read twice, a particular corner of the city she loved in winter, the reason he had started wearing that specific charcoal coat. The coat had been a gift from his grandfather. He said it like a fact. She stored it like something precious and did not examine why. On Thursday morning, she opened the shop at 9. She had not texted him. He had not texted her. She restocked the window display. She took a supplier call. She made coffee. She helped a young woman choose between 2 shades of fabric for a set of curtains, a warm cream and a cool white, and found herself describing the difference with more feeling than curtains strictly required, because she was talking about something with her hands and her mouth, while her attention was somewhere else entirely. By noon, the shop was quiet. She sat at the counter and looked at the street outside. She folded a gold scarf, 4 corners. Perfect. She set it down. She folded another one, then another. She had folded all 14 gold scarves in the display stock before she registered what she was doing, and then she looked at the pile of them, 14 perfect squares of silk, and she thought, this is what I do when I am waiting for something I will not admit I am waiting for. She put the scarves away. At 5:30, she began closing. She turned off the display lights in sequence, the back wall first, then the side panels, then the window, until only the work light above the counter was on and the rest of the shop was in that particular shade of early dark that felt like the world pausing between things. She heard a knock at the glass. Not Darius, she knew before she turned. The shape of the knock was different, patient, not demanding entry, just asking. She went to the door. Roshan was standing outside without a coat. She had never seen him without the charcoal coat. He looked different, not smaller, just more present, more like a person and less like a decision she was still processing. He had his hands in his jacket pockets, and the light from the street caught the side of his face, and he looked at her through the glass with that same direct, undefended attention she had been trying to catalog and file away since the first night. She unlocked the door. She did not move back to let him in. She stood in the doorway. He said, "The 3 weeks are done." She said, "I know." He said, "I'd like to make a different arrangement." She looked at him. She thought about everything Mrs. Fidel had said. She thought about Darius's words, "I'm trying to protect you," and the way those words had functioned in practice, what protection had looked like when it came from the wrong direction. She thought about Roshan saying the cost is real, and meaning it and not softening it, and about how that single quality, the willingness to say a hard thing plainly instead of dressing it up, was rarer than she had once understood it to be. She thought about the charcoal coat and whose it had been. She thought about sleeping before midnight. She said, "What kind of arrangement?" He almost smiled. It moved across his face the way light moves across water. There and gone, not quite landing. "An honest one," he said. "No terms, no end date." She looked at him. She looked past him at the street, a few people walking, the ordinary world doing its ordinary things. She looked back at him. She said, "Your family." He said, "I know." She said, "That's not a small problem." He said, "No." She said, "I need you to understand that I built everything I have myself. I am not interested in being a problem that someone manages. He said, I know what you built. I have been paying attention. She held the door. She looked at the work light above the counter behind her, and the folded gold scarves on the shelf, and the window display she had just turned off, and all the small, ordinary parts of the life she had constructed out of the rubble of a harder time. She did not fold anything. She did not straighten anything. She did not reach for something to do with her hands. She stepped back from the doorway. She said, Come in. He came in. The bell above the door rang, clear and bright, the same as always. She left the work light on. They stood in the middle of the shop floor in the amber half-dark, and neither of them said anything for a moment, and the moment was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that does not need filling. There was no guarantee that what came next would be easy. There was the family, and the cost, and the years she had spent learning to trust her own instincts after a long time of not being allowed to have instincts of her own. And there was the fundamental fact that she was a woman who had once rebuilt herself from the ground up and was very careful about what she let in through the door now. She knew all of this. She held all of this, and she held it clearly, with open eyes, standing in her own shop with the work light on. She moved to the small table near the window and picked up the carafe. She poured 2 cups. She did not ask if he was staying. She did not need to. He sat down. She sat across from him, the same small table between them as always, and she picked up her cup, and outside the street carried on with its ordinary evening, and the gold scarves sat in their perfect folded pile on the shelf, and the shop light stayed on long after the hour, when she usually turned everything off and went home. This time she did not turn it off. Neither did he. And somehow, in the quiet of that small lit room with the rain just beginning again outside and 2 cups of coffee going warm between them, that felt like exactly the right place to begin.